A warm welcome to everyone.
Good evening. Welcome, everybody.
Before we start with our lecture, I will request Advocate Vaishali Tikle to give a small, brief introduction about Sir.
Thank you, Shraddha. Good evening, sir, and a very warm evening to one and all connected to this 13th webinar series. I take this opportunity to introduce today's speaker, eminent and renowned lawyer, author, and legal analyst, Advocate Anil Malhotra, sir. The topic today he will be covering is parentage, child custody, gender and equality, socio-legal perspective. Advocate Anil Malhotra is practicing advocate in India since October 1983 at Punjab and Haryana High Court at Chandigarh. He also appears as counsel in Supreme Court of India at New Delhi and before other high courts, commissions, boards and tribunals all over India. For over 35 years, Sir has had extensive exposure in handling civil, matrimonial, criminal, and overseas litigation on behalf of non-resident Indians residing abroad. Sir is also a member of Lavasia International Law Association, International Bar Association, Commonwealth Lawyers Association, and Indian Society of International Laws, besides being country representative in family laws, Lavasia. Besides practice, Sir is also in teaching. Sir is also a teacher and was retained as part-time lecturer, Faculty of Law, Punjab University, Chandigarh from 1986 to 1992 for teaching professional subjects to final year LLB students at the Department of Laws, Punjab University, Chandigarh. As an author, Sir has, to his credit, substantial published work in international legal journalists on issues relating to interparental child abduction, surrogacy, human smuggling, and other issues of Indian matrimonial laws. Now, friends, without any further ado, I invite and request Sir to enlighten us on this topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the warm introduction. Greetings to everybody. I am speaking from Chandigarh and would be very happy to share with you thoughts, views, and perspectives on issues of the topic concerning parentage, child custody, gender inequality. And we will look at some perspectives which are socio-legal and broadly we will, as requested, I will look at joint and shared custody, child psychology, in such litigation, post-litigation issues, then the rights of the child being the paramount consideration in all such custody matters. Then the role of lawyers who handle such matters is very important. And then what happens to foreign court decrees in this perspective, both in country and outside country. Now, friends, before I start, I want to share with you something very interesting, which is what is perhaps going to be the future in matters of child custody. In a proceeding in Delhi High Court on Friday, 24th of April 2020, an honorable single judge, Justice Najeem Waziri, has passed a very interesting order regarding shared custody and shared parenting or access, whatever you may like to call it. Now, this is a case in which there are 3 girl children, 10, 7, and 3 years of age. Now, the custody of the children is with the father, and the mother had moved the High Court for access by video conferencing since physical contact is not possible. Now, the court has granted a very novel relief. Now, the court has said that the respondent father shall ensure that there is a computer installed in the room where the children are, in the children's room, where they will be free to access their mother on Skype, etc., and would be able to speak to the mother whenever they desire or whenever the mother desires. And the court says the respondent father shall ensure that the computer is in constant working condition with regular internet connectivity. He shall be absent from the room whenever the children are speaking to their mother. The children shall be free to keep their room door closed but not locked from inside, so that they have unrestricted or unhindered conversation with their mother, especially keeping in mind that they are minor girls. Now, why does the court do this? The court says, for a healthy emotional quotient and robust psychological health of the children, the mother should be provided unhindered access to the daughters, if not physically, then through video conferencing for the moment. Now, the most interesting thing is that the counsel for the father has assured the court that the said arrangement shall be made and the petitioner mother shall be provided connection with access to the children as directed. In the case of difficulties, the learned counsel for the parties will coordinate between themselves. Now, friends, this is going to be the future of cases concerning children. But in the wisdom of the Delhi High Court, this has happened. Another very interesting thing which the Delhi High Court has done is that on 26th of April 2020, the Registrar General has passed an order removing the extra urgent and very urgent issue of fixing cases for hearing, and has directed in a list, inter alia, matters concerning the Domestic Violence Act, matters concerning custody, maintenance and visitation rights to be listed for hearing by video conferencing. In matters where both sides are appearing, which are ripe for arguments, and in which both parties consent to a hearing. So the method, the medium of regular hearing in cases, in matters where children are at stake, has started. I think the Delhi High Court has shown the lead, and this is something seriously I would think that countries should follow. Now, this brings me to a very interesting quote of Lord Alfred Tennyson in his famous poem, The Memoriam. It says, "Now it so runs my dream, but what am I? An infant crying in the night, an infant crying for the light, and with no language but a cry." So, friends, this is a situation in which we are pitted, and this is how it comes up in the perspective of child laws in India. Now, friends, if children are our future, then why are we not trying harder to find solutions for them? Is it easier to build strong children than to repair broken marriages? Children make your life very important. Now, it is in this perspective that in the future we will be now looking at virtual child rights jurisprudence in e-courts with virtual distance, and how will we devise joint custody with shared parenting and gender preferences is something which is going to occupy us all, and all of us perhaps will have to assist the court in innovating and in finding ways and means on how we are going to deal with these issues. But friends, let us first see where is the foundation of the rights of the child. My focus, my perspective to you today is on the rights of the child, because in my humble view, the jurisprudence which we have to develop is a child-centered jurisprudence. In matters relating to custody of children, other than matters when there are issues of domestic violence or matrimonial rights, it is not the rights of the parents. It is not the rights of the spouses which are to be decided. The child is not a trophy. The child is not a pawn to be used in a custody battle. So it is in this perspective, the foundation for this, very few of us may know, is in the directive principles of state policy. And in Article 39 of the Constitution, I read an excerpt. It says that, though we all know they are non-justiciable, but still, the state shall in particular direct its policies towards securing that children are given opportunities and facilities to develop in a healthy manner, and in conditions of freedom and dignity, and that the childhood and youth are protected against exploitation and against moral and material abandonment. Now, friends, there are two international conventions in the perspective. The first is the Hague Convention on Civil Aspects of International Child Abduction, which India has not signed, which 100 countries have signed. We'll leave that apart for a moment. The second convention, which India is a signatory to, and on the plank of which the entire rights of children rest, is the Convention on the Rights of the Child, adopted by the United Nations General Assembly on 20th of November 1989. And friends, this convention was ratified by the Government of India on the 11th of December 1992. Pursuant to this, we have made amendments in our laws, but the fulcrum, the foundation, the basis of child rights jurisprudence in India rests on the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. I have successfully been able to advocate the applicability of this convention in 3 recent matters, and happily and luckily, even the Supreme Court is now talking of a child-centered jurisprudence and the rights of the child vis-a-vis the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. But to understand the perspective from where this comes, the UN Convention preamble, I'm going to read parts of it. It says, the state parties to the present convention, convinced that the family as the fundamental group of society and the natural environment for the growth and well-being of all its members, and particularly children, should be allowed and afforded the necessary protection and assistance so that it can fully assume its responsibilities within the community, recognizing that the child, for the full and harmonious development of his or her personality, should grow up in a family environment in an atmosphere of happiness, love, and understanding. Bearing in mind that, as indicated in the Declaration of the Rights of the child shall, by reason of his physical and mental maturity, need special safeguards and care and appropriate legal protection, taking due account of the importance and traditions of the cultural values of the development of the child, recognizing the importance of international cooperation, of living conditions in the country, etc., have agreed to as follows. Now, the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child is talking about, in the articles, I'll not go into the details because that will be pretty long, but it assures to a child a right to life, that is a right to a family life, a right to an identity, nationality, name, family relations without unlawful interference, and not to be separated from parents. It ensures an expeditious family reunification and speedy decision on child's place of residence if parents are living separately. The child is not to be deprived of family environment and right of direct contact with both parents. Now, just to fill you in, the judgment of Justice Sen regarding the rights of an unwed mother to a passport and then birth certificate in the name of singular name of the mother without the father being named, based on this UNCRC, is well known in the celebrated judgment of the Supreme Court in ABC versus State. It's a 2015 Supreme Court judgment. But otherwise, there is also a clear judgment of the Supreme Court in 2008 which says that if India is a signatory to an international convention, ipso facto, the terms of the convention are applicable to domestic law. Now, friends, it is with this background that we come to principally where the legislation was brought in to give teeth to the convention. You all know that we have the Juvenile Justice, Care or Protection in Children Act, which was enacted in 1986. Then it became the Act of 2000, then it became the Act of 2010. Now it is the Juvenile Justice, Care and Protection of Children Act 2015. Now, the 2015 Act incorporates all the provisions of the UNCRC in the law applicable to children in India. Principally, the JJ Act applies to two categories of children. One, children who are in conflict with law, that is often abandoned surrendered children. Also, besides that, and children in need of care and protection. Now, who are children in need of care and protection? This is finding definition within section 214. Now, if there is a child who resides with a person, whether a guardian of the child or not, and such person has violated any other law for the time being enforced for the protection of the child. So if there is a child whose parental rights have been violated, maybe even by the other parent, broadly this definition will cover such children. And this has been successfully followed by the Supreme Court in Lahari Sakhamuri, a recent judgment given by Justice Khanvilkar, where the best interest of the child has been followed and adhered to, besides other judgments of the Delhi High Court. Now, friends, a lot of us don't know that there is only one law, that there is only one statutory legislation which defines the best interest of the child. The Guardian and Wards Act is silent. The Hindu Minority Guardianship Act is silent. The Hindu Adoption Maintenance Act is silent. But Section 2, subsection 9 of the JJ Act says the best interest of the child means the basis of any decision taken regarding the child to ensure fulfillment of his basic rights and needs, identity, social well-being, and physical and emotional and intellectual development. So left to an enlightened judge, be the district court, be the family court, or be the high court, I think the justice can be easily done to a child if this provision is strictly sought to be implemented. Now, I'm not going into the details, but for those of you who do child rights matters, please read section 3, which gives the general principles to be followed in the administration of the JJ Act. It talks of the best interest of the child to help child develop to the full potential. Principles of family responsibility, that is care, nurture and protection shall be the responsibility of the biological family. Then section 3, subsection 13, principles of repatriation and restoration, a right to be reunited with the family. Now, this enactment is also finding another enunciation in the National Charter for Children 2003, which had been published in the Gazette of India dated 9th of February 2014 by the Ministry of Human Resource Development, Department of Women and Child Development, Government of India, and it talks in the preamble and in paras rights of the child, where the a child has a right to a family, and in cases of separation to be reunited with both parents in the best interest of the child. The common responsibility of rearing the children shall be of both the parents. So friends, if you are in a petition concerning the rights of children, do not look at what the mother is saying and do not look at what the father is saying. Find appurtenant evidence, find documentary proof, find expert reports or whatever material is with you to support the rights of the child, and the parameters in statute and in policy are before you. So this is a very good perspective or a pointer for us to think of a serious shift in which we can look at all these things. I have in my last book, The Rights of the Removed Child and the Law in India, looked in 650 pages, looked at all this in detail, and right now I'm also working on another book, The Global Indian in the Law, where part of it is going to be looked into. So in this perspective, let us see where we are today. Now this is the statute, and as you all know, when we are in a petition, what do we urge? We urge the provisions of the Guardian and Wards Act or the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act. As you all know, the Guardian and Wards Act is an act of 1890. The Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act is an act of 1956. Now, Section 4 of the Guardian and Wards Act defines who is a guardian as a person having the care of the children of the person of a minor or his property, or both of his person and property. Section 7 talks of the properties of a guardian, power of the court to appoint a guardian. Section 12 talks of interim custody issues. Section 17 talks of matters to be considered in appointing a guardian. And it says that the welfare of the child shall be paramount consideration. Section 19 talks of when guardian is not to be appointed. And it very clearly in Section 19b says that if a mother or a father is alive and is not declared unfit, the court cannot appoint a guardian. Then Section 25 talks of a return of a ward to the guardian if a child is removed from the custody of his natural parent. So friends, this is a rundown of the Guardian and Wards Act 1890. It was made at a time when the British thought of an enactment. I will just in a moment come to what the Law Commission says about it. But first, the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act. Now, the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act made in 1956 in Section 2 says that the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act is supplemental to the Guardian and Wards Act. It is in addition to and not in derogation of the Guardian and Wards Act. So, principally, the HMGA is a supplemental legislation. It is an enabling legislation. It is not the principal legislation. Section 4B talks of the definition of guardian and it includes the natural guardian. Then Section 6 is where the parental rights come in. Section 6 says that the natural guardian of a child shall be the father and after the mother. But Geeta Hariharan's case where the Supreme Court says that both are equal. And the most interesting part is that the custody of a minor less than 5 years of age shall be with the mother. Now, I pause here for a moment. Let us understand it is only the custody of a child of 5 years of age which is to be with the mother. Even if the custody is with the mother, the guardianship is still with the father. Both the father and the mother are natural guardians. So, physical custody will not divest the father's natural rights as a guardian per se, because Section 6 is only limited to that extent. Sorry. Now, there is another argument that the residence of the child is the residence of the mother. And this is so said in the perspective of Section 6 because it is propounded by one school of thought that if the child is physically in the custody of the mother, then the residence of the mother is the residence of the child. Now to this, there is a counter view of a number of high courts which says that the issue regarding the residence of a child is governed by Section 9 of the Guardian and Wards Act, not Section 6 of the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act. Insofar, Section 9 of the Guardian and Wards Act says that the guardian judge shall have jurisdiction over a child who ordinarily resides in the jurisdiction of the court. So the ordinarily resides jurisdictional issue is based on the principles enunciated in Section 9 of the GWA. And in view of what Section 2 of the HMGA says, that it is only a supplemental legislation and not in derogation of any other legislation, the rights, so to say, appurtenant vis-a-vis custody pale into insignificance if we talk of a superior right of custody and of residence vis-a-vis HMGA. So if a court has to decide what is the jurisdiction, then the court has to decide as per principles laid down in Section 9 of the Guardian and Wards Act. And Section 9 of the Guardian and Wards Act, as has been interpreted by a number of courts, means to say that this is the place where the child habitually and normally resides. not the date on which the child is residing, on which the date a petition is filed, not where a child is retained or forcibly kept. Now, what is a habitual residence, physical residence? This will obviously need to be established by facts. But Ruchi Baju's case by the Supreme Court, Justice Thakur very elaborately says that if a guardian judge has no jurisdiction, then the guardian judge can pass no order. But this is dehors the power of the High Court in a 226 petition, that is under the Constitution of India, say habeas corpus, where a High Court exercising parents betray jurisdiction has exclusive rights, and any limiting factor of jurisdiction under Section 9 will not divest the High Court of passing any order, maybe for retaining the child, maybe for sending the child's custody issue to the Guardian and Wards Act, for a decision by the family court or the guardian judge, or asking the parent concerned to go back to the country from where the child was removed. Now, this, friends, is the broad scenario where we are. Now, the Law Commission in report number 257, Reform in Guardianship and Custody Laws in India, looked at these issues very seriously and seriously recommended joint custody and reasons for adopting joint custody. Now, this report is worth reading. It has not found acceptance, but it is definitely noteworthy to say that this report looks at what is the concept of joint custody, what is shared custody, what are the advantages. It looks at the definition which has been given. There is a Bombay-based NGO called Child Rights Foundation which has given a definition of child access in child custody. It says child may reside alternately, 1 week with the custodial parent and 1 week with the non-custodial parent, and that both custodial and non-custodial parents share joint responsibility for decisions involving child's long care, welfare and development. Now, this is a very good definition. Now, the report also looks at reasons for adopting joint custody. They do not really advocate any presumption in favor of equal guardianship for both parents, but Section 6 of the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act is already saying that both parents are natural guardians. So that may perhaps not be a very contestable issue. Now, they have recommended drastic changes and talked of parenting plans, etc. And they have given suggestions on how to amend the Guardian and Wards Act and the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act, but obviously nothing is found further. Now, what is very interesting is that this judgment has been noticed by the Bombay High Court in Tushar Vishnu Bale versus Archana Tushar Bale, AIR 2016, Bombay 88. And Justice Mridula Bhatkar has done a wonderful job in coming out with some very blunt principles and concepts which are very noteworthy. And she quotes Justice Dalvi, Roshan Dalvi, who in his workshops used to say, rhetorically, but she says, but aptly, that the word family means F for father, A for and, M for mother, I for I, L for love, and Y for you. So the word family, according to Justice Dalvi, means father and mother, I love you. Now, this is such a stark and such a hitting proposition. And Justice Mridula Bhatkar very rightly says, you may be a bad husband, you may be a very bad wife, but you may be a very good father, you may be an excellent mother. So in this perspective, parenting plans, arrangements of mutual custody, rule of single parenting are, they say, an exception. So it is in this perspective that the court is talking of a parenting plan and custody plan, and in this case, the court has actually done it. The court has said 10 days father, 10 days mother. So this is something which has, and this is something which has come from the Law Commission report. The Law Commission report is extensively referred to, and the principle underlying is the principle of the welfare of the child. I have myself got this principle followed in a very bitter custody dispute between a couple, the father and the mother, over their only son, who is loved fiercely and very emotionally by both the father and the mother. They have serious matrimonial differences which they are trying to resolve, but they have not been able to resolve. Both of them want the child to themselves, but the child wants both the father and the mother. The child was taken away by the father. The mother unsuccessfully tried in the habeas corpus and then went to a guardian judge. We went to the guardian judge. We got interim custody. It was challenged in the High Court. Now the High Court devised a very good formula. It says Monday, since the child was being schooled in place A, so the court said Monday to Friday, child with mother in place where he is being schooled and where he is staying. Friday evening, the child is to be handed over to the father. And on Sunday evening, the father will return the child to the mother. So the child has access, love, control, contact, affection, care of both his parents. So this, friends, this hypothesis of shared parenting, joint custody is not an alien thing which we can't come to. And how and why can we do it? Very simple. The Family Courts Act 1984 gives complete freedom to a family court judge to devise ways and means of resolving the best interests of the child. And in this perspective, the court is free from the rigors of the Evidence Act and the Civil Procedure Code. It's not bound to follow it. It's free to coin its own procedure. So stricto sensu, if you have any documentary evidence or any material which you wish to put before the court, it need not need formal proof of the law of evidence. If the judge is prima facie convinced that that evidence is noteworthy, it can proceed. I have myself seen a family court judge in a custody matter observing that the child is severely alienated and I would need a psychologist's report. So this is the perspective of the judge. How is the judge free to do so? Because the judge can coin his or her own procedure. So this is a time when we can innovate. Looking at this in a bigger picture, I am a fellow of the International Academy of Family Law Lawyers, so I have an association with family law lawyers worldwide. Australia has done very well. Australia has a dedicated family law judiciary, a dedicated family law bar. There are over 5,000 exclusive family law practitioners, and they start with mediation and alternative dispute resolution in any litigation. The Family Court of Australia is headed by the Chief Justice of the Family Court of Australia, who decides what is to be done in matters pertaining to the family courts. And the Family Courts of Australia has gone so far that they have devised Practice Directions COVID 2020. It is a 50-page manual which is looking at the entire procedure of how family court litigation is going to be handled in the future. It talks of face-to-face contact, it talks of filing methods, it talks of hearings, it talks of child not to be taken out of the jurisdiction. They have conceivably thought of every possible measure which they can think of. Hong Kong is looking at it very seriously. And I think it is time that even we in India would devise a family court module on how to take family court litigation forward. It may not be possible for every family court to devise its own module. So I think the best thing to be done is that the Judicial Academy of India or any state judicial academy can devise a module and leave it to the family court to follow it and innovate in it or add or subtract to it and maybe look at things in a perspective in which they can handle things. Now, friends, there is another perspective which I want you to know. The University of Westminster, in a recent study called The Voice of the Child in International Child Abduction Proceedings, has looked at Article 12 of the UNCRC, which talks of the voice of the child. Should we have the views of the child? And in a child-centric approach, they say, hear the children while making a decision in the process. Even the Guardian and Wards Act says that if the child is old enough to give an intelligent preference, the court must ascertain the views of the child. Now, in the conclusion of the report, it is said that the courts need to understand that they are not deciding on a parking ticket. They need to look at the individual circumstances, because this is a defining moment in a child's life. So this is something which needs to seize all of us. Now, very quickly, what are the perspectives of a child litigation? Now, we have a string of judgments. As you all know, law in child custody matters is evolved through precedents. In Article 141 binds every court to follow what the Supreme Court says. So we start with Surinder Kaur in 1984, where Justice Chandrachud said, jurisdiction which has the closest contact, following committee of courts should decide on the principle of the welfare of the child. Then it also lays down the parents pay tray principle in return of children. Then the temporary residence of the child is governed, as I told you, by Ruchi Maju. Now, welfare of the child is of paramount consideration. Now, the welfare of the child coming in a child-centric jurisprudence is finding repeatedly enunciation by the Supreme Court. And Perry Kessingra, the latest judgment of the Supreme Court in 2019, following Ashish versus Anupama 2010 Supreme Court, says, statutory provisions dealing with the custody of the child under any personal law cannot and must not supersede the paramount consideration as to what is conducive for the welfare of the minor. In fact, no statute on the subject can ignore, eschew, or obliterate the vital factor of the welfare of the minor. So you cannot say that I have the custody under 5 years of age, I am the custodian. If the welfare is not with you, is not comfortable with you in the view of the court, then there is no view. And this is actually said in Lahari Sakhamuri in 2019. This is the most recent judgment in point of time, wherein upholding the High Court judgment of the High Court of Andhra in Soban Kadali, the court says the expression, quote unquote, the expression best interest of the child. Now, friends, this is where the best interest of the child in section 2(9) has found judicial approval. And the court says the expression best interest of the child, which is always kept to be of paramount consideration, is indeed wide in connotation. And now I'm going to stress here, it cannot remain the love and care of the primary caregiver, i.e. the mother in case of the infant or the child, which is only 5 years old. The definition best interest of the child is envisaged in section 2(9) of the JJ Act to mean the basis of any decision being taken regarding the child to ensure fulfillment of his basic right, needs, identity, social well-being, physical, emotional, and intellectual development. So friends, this is where the gender preference, the statutory preference, the right of the primary caregiver, the predominant right of the parent having custody vis-a-vis the welfare of the child has been demolished, and it is free. If the child is less than 5 years old, the court is free to devise its own reason why the child should be with the parent. In the West and in most jurisdictions, the gender segregation is gone. You no longer talk of the mother and the father, you talk of the parent. You have a sit-home father, you have a working mother, or vice versa. And both parents share. It's equal. There is no exclusive right of custody, because the concept of sole custody is a concept which is now fading into oblivion vis-a-vis the right of the child. And there can be nothing better on parental alienation than the judgment of Justice Sikri in Vivek Singh versus Romani Singh, where he talks of parental alienation in very good words. In fact, this is the only judgment which talks of parental alienation syndrome. It says that the child-centric human rights jurisprudence has evolved over a period of time and is founded on the principle that public good demands proper growth of the child or the future of the child. It says no doubt this presumption in favor of the maternal custody as sound welfare policy is rebuttable, and in a given case, it can be shown that the father is better suited to have the custody of the child. Such an assessment has only been done after a level playing field is granted to both the parents. So friends, this is broadly what the law is all about insofar this is concerned. Then there has been another judgment of the Supreme Court in Tejaswini God by Justice Bhanumati. This is 2019 judgment. And there again the Supreme Court says the court while deciding cases is not bound by the mere legal rights of the parent or the guardian. Provisions of special statutes govern the rights of parents, but the welfare of the child is a paramount consideration and it ought to be in the welfare and interest of the child. So this is the latest view of the Supreme Court given in this perspective. So friends, this is broadly what the whole scenario is all about. And my speaking time is over and I have to put you the questions, but I will leave you with a quote from the very famous judgment of Wordsworth in his poem called The Rainbow. Now, Wordsworth says, my heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So it is now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old or let me die. The child is the father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to them by natural beauty. So friends, with the note that the child is the father of the man, I give you the floor for questions. Shraddha, questions please. Hello? Hello?
Hello, sir.
I will.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I've as scheduled 45 minutes are over. And if you want me to speak more, I'm fine. Otherwise, the floor is open.
So we don't mind you speaking more 15 minutes also, because like from 6 to 6:15, 20, we can have the question-answer session then.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
So friends, since I have got some more time, let me open you to a principle which I have successfully been able to advocate and evolve and put forth to the courts in India. I was part of the Hague Committee constituted by the Government of India, headed by Honorable Justice Bindal, with honorable judges and government officers. There is a 2-volume report, and in this 2-volume report, we have suggested a bill. It is called the Protection of Children Inter-Country Removal and Retention Bill 2018. There is a definition of wrongful removal or retention. Now, just to put you in the right perspective, child removal is not an offense vis-a-vis interparental rights. In the criminal law perspective, there has been a proposition by the Delhi High Court where a charge of kidnapping has been raised against a parent, invoking IPC section 361, 363, but the matter is pending before Supreme Court. Now, I say so because both the Law Commission and our report says that wrongful removal or retention is a civil remedy. Wrongful removal or retention, even in the Hague Convention, though it is using the word abduction in the title, but nowhere does it talk of abduction. It says simply that the removal is wrongful or retention is wrongful when a child's custody rights are violated by a parent or a parent who's actually exercising these rights is deprived of exercising such rights. Now, this 2-volume report is available online. I have it before me. It's a thick book. This is what it looks like. You can access it on the web. This report is freely available. There is a lot of material. There are a lot of interviews. There are a lot of discussions which have taken place in the drafting of the report. Now, there is also a Law Commission report number 263 on the protection of children, inter-country removal and detention bill 2016. The Law Commission under Justice Chauhan has also looked at seriously having a law in place. Now, all this is before the government. When is Parliament going to meet to make a law? We don't know. But then, friends, can children wait? Can matters wait? Answer is no. They cannot. So how do we evolve a method, a medium, or a process of return of children, be they be brought to India or be they be taken out of India? Now the answer is, as I have tried to put across in the case of Dr. Navtej Singh, is a mirror order jurisprudence. There is a judgment of 6th March 2018 in Dr. Navtej Singh versus State of NCT Delhi. It is reported in all journals. Now, in this case, there were 2 children removed, 2 children brought to India. One child was born here. There are 2 children at stake. The matter stands concluded and decided, so I can now talk of it since it's a reported case. The court ultimately has come to the conclusion that it is in the best interest of the children to go back to USA. This has also been the finding by the family court in a guardianship petition. Both the judgments have been upheld by the Supreme Court. But what is the most interesting thing in the litigation, which has lasted 3 years and 3 rounds and 6 judgments of different courts? It is the mirror order jurisprudence. The Delhi High Court directed the return of the mother with the children back to USA, but asked me to follow the conditions which the High Court felt were necessary for the protection of the children and the mother. That is, the father shall not seek criminal prosecution of the mother because in the US, child removal is a federal offense. Second, the mother shall be provided an independent place of stay and the father will not reside in that place. The children will not be deprived of the physical custody of the mother till a court of competent jurisdiction in the US takes a decision. The father will have visitation rights. The father will provide, and they labeled all the heads under which he will provide financial support till the mother goes back to work or is independently able to support herself. The father will also fund a litigation to get the matter settled. And the father will not take any steps leading to incriminating the mother. So it is in this perspective, let us first understand, no court wants to see a father or a mother in jail for removing his children. This is a matter which needs resolution. And there cannot be a better phrase than the word family, as Justice Dalvi or Justice Bhatkar has put it. So after this order was given, I went back to the US court and I requested the US court to modify its order. So they very accommodatingly modified the order giving me sole custody. They incorporated all the conditions of the Delhi High Court in the US court order and gave me another order and also gave me a detailed transcript where everything was recorded. So I came back to the Delhi High Court and on 14th of May 2018, the Delhi High Court ordered the return of the children. The matter was taken to Supreme Court. Meanwhile, the Guardian Court had also decided the matter in favor of the father. Again, thereafter, the Delhi High Court in a separate division bench judgment upheld the judgment of the single judge of the family court. And again, Justice Sistani, in a very well-worded judgment following the definition of the best interest of the child given in the JJ Act, said that it is in the welfare of the children that the children should go back. And children need, they repeatedly say, children need both the father and the mother. So the children have a right to be reunited with the family. They talk of a child-centered jurisprudence. They talk of the best interest of the child. And they say that the best interest of the children can be safeguarded, that the children should go back to the country from where they came. The Supreme Court, while hearing the matter, called both the parties in chambers, put a proposition to them, modifying those conditions or reiterating part of them, and the consent order was passed, and the family is supposed to be reunited in the US when things settle down. So friends, this is a mirror order jurisprudence which we will perhaps need to incorporate in our system if we want a free return of children and we want foreign jurisdictions to let children come into India. As of now, any foreign court will not allow any child in a broken relationship to come to India to meet parents, grandparents, or extended family. For the simple reason that if a child, the view is that if a child goes to India, the child will never come back. But if we are able to evolve a mirror order jurisprudence through the process of committee of courts, and if we start mirroring foreign court orders and foreign courts start mirroring Indian orders, I know it's going to be a difficult process. It's going to take time for acceptance. But then this is the only way forward. And where statute is not there, law evolves through law made by courts. Vishakha, sexual harassment, adoptions, Lakshmikant Pandey are striking examples. So if till Parliament makes a law, the court may perhaps in given cases, on a case-to-case basis, develop formulas, methods or mediums by which child rights will be implemented. Now, I left you with Surinder Kaur. Then we came to Dhanvanti Joshi, where the Supreme Court said children will not go back. Then we had Ravi Chandran's case, a direct judgment by the Supreme Court by Justice Lodha, where the children were asked to go back when the mother was moving within India and the CBI was asked to track her down. Then came Justice Lukur's judgment in Suryavadanan. Suryavadanan laid down three principles. 1, comity of courts. 2, theory of first strike. 3, jurisdiction of closest contact. Comity of courts, we all understand, courts must respect each other. Theory of first strike was whichever jurisdiction takes cognizance moves first. And then the third was principle of closest contact emerging from Surinder Kaur, Justice Chandrachud's. Then came Nityanand Raghavan, Justice Deepak Mishra and Justice Khanwilkar, and their point number 1, comity of courts and theory of first strike were watered down, only jurisdiction of closest contact was there. Thereafter, there has been Lahari Sakhamuri, where in a wishy-washy way, I think comity of courts has been brought back, theory of first strike is still not there. But the principle of jurisdiction of closest contact coming from Surinder Kaur in 1984 till 2019 is finding favor. The Supreme Court in Nityanand Raghavan, Lahari Sakhamuri says that to decide the welfare and the best interest of the children, the court can hold a summary inquiry or the court can hold a detailed inquiry. And in this process of summary or detailed inquiry, the court can decide whether it is going to send the matter for decision-making process within the country to the domestic court, the family court, or the guardian judge, or it will send the children back to the jurisdiction from where the children came. This is being advocated, and I think if we couple this third principle with the mirror order jurisprudence, we can actually get a way work to move forward. If we are able to afford protection to a parent who has brought children rightfully or wrongfully to India to go back to a jurisdiction, or we have to let parents to visit India if they have to be with their children, and such parent, father or mother, needs protection from Domestic Violence Act, from 498A, 406, 125. We have a plethora of provisions for matrimonial litigation. We can also devise these protections and give a free passage to parents to come and visit children. In a time to come, more and more matters will have to evolve by settlement. And you are very lucky that Madam Mrinalini Deshmukh is there to guide you in your bar, because she has a very mature perspective, and I've seen that She's very heavily weighed into settlement. So friends, as counsel, if you can follow the process of mediation and settlement, see the judgment of Justice Najeem Waziri of Friday of 24th of April. It has evolved a formula of providing contact to all the three children by video conferencing exclusively, so that the children can freely talk to their mother without their father being there. So the children will not have a feeling of alienation. The children will not be unhappy. The children will have access to both the parents. And this actually might be a process of bringing the family together. After all, children can resolve bitterness. Children can dissipate the anger. Children's needs, children's requirements can help parties settle their differences. So friends, if as counsels you can dissolve the egos of the spouses and tell them not to use children as trophies or as awards for underscoring the other parent, you may be doing a great service. As family court lawyers or lawyers practicing in the domain of family law, lawyers have a bigger role in settling matters. Jurisdictions where family courts exist are a wonderful example. I go to Delhi and I see T. Sazari, Karkadoma, Saket, and Patala House, where the family court building is a separate building other than the civil court building, and there is a mediator, there is a family court judge, there is separate infrastructure. And happily, the Family Courts Act 1984 gives the judge complete freedom. There is a principal family court judge, so the family court judge is a judge in his own domain. And in my discussions or wherever I go as a resource person to judicial academies, I tell the judges, you decide, rightly or wrongly. Take a view, take it to an extreme end, this way or that way. That is how law will evolve. Once you give a pronouncement, once you give a decision, that is how we will have a judgment. This is how a mirror order jurisprudence has come on the foothold. I don't say it is already there. I have stepped on the threshold of mirror order jurisprudence by having it before the Supreme Court and the High Court judgments being sustained, not overruled. But it has to catch on. It should get viral. While the virus invades us, let the viral effect of the judgment be an antidote to the custody rights being freely available to children. So this, friends, is my message to you, to feel free. Let us hope the Delhi High Court example of putting family court matters on priority will prevail. Even the Supreme Court has ordered that life and liberty, death sentences, and family court matters shall be given priority for hearing. So there is a sensitivity to issues relating to children, and the judiciary is very aware of it. Let us take advantage of it. Let us help the courts in a constructive role building processes. Let us not treat child custody cases as adversarial litigation. According to me, whichever parent wins a child custody case actually loses the case, because he loses the child. See an alienated child, see the trauma, see the shock. My first child abduction client was a lady who came to me in 1986. I was in the chambers of Justice Kuldeep Singh, who was then a QC in courts here. She followed her husband, who had removed the child from the UK. She was not able to secure him. By the time we got to him, he appeared and then he vanished. The High Court gave me a roving writ, adjourned the matter sine die, and told me, come back whenever you find him. We never found him. The lady ultimately found him in the US after 12 years. she was able to bring him back, and she formed Reunite. Reunite today is the biggest NGO in the world which helps put children together. And this is how the jurisdiction grew. But the ending of the story was very sad. The child grew up with the mother, but always suspected, or so to say, looked at the whole thing, always wanting to know who was his father. He doesn't live with his mother, he's married. So, friends, a child of a broken home, we cannot generalize the concept, will not always have a happy life. So if we can prevent and follow the remedy principle of prevention is better than cure, let us glue families. Let us amalgamate the unit. Let us put efforts, heart and soul into joining parents in the interest of children. So that, friends, is my best message to you today. And I have done my 15 minutes extra. Shraddha, you can take over for questions now.
Okay, sir, I will take over. Shraddha is busy in syllabus. I will start reading questions.
Yep.
This is from Mr. Lal. Parental alienation is more rampant when one parent uses the child for achieving his or her objective.
Come again. You need to go a little slowly.
Yeah. 1 second, sir. Actually, they're flooding with the queries, so even I'm not able to read it. Okay. Yeah. Parental alienation is more rampant when one parent uses the child for achieving his or her objective using the child, irrespective of child's right consideration, execution of access of such a child by NCP, non-custodial parent, that is, becomes major issue. Child grows into an adult and both NCP and child suffers. How do you recommend we solve this issue?
See, as I told you, joint parenting, joint custody, shared parenting is the answer. And the best answer is in the judgment of Justice Mridula Bhatkar, AIR 2060, Bombay 88. I think this is a judgment which you should circulate among all. It's reported in the AIR. It has the ingredients of the report of the Law Commission. It has everything into it. And I think it is a wholesome answer to parental alienation syndrome. See, the only way we can get rid of parental alienation is contact. See what Justice Najeem Waziri has done in the Delhi High Court on Friday. Now, if these children during the lockdown are not able to meet their mother or have access to her, the father knows that physically it is not possible for the children to meet the mother. Now, what has the judge done? He has told the father to get a computer with internet access and told the children to be in touch with the mother for the father not being there. So once the children are in contact with their father, they know he is available with their mother. This negativity of parental alienation will be gone. So all of us have to devise ways, means and methods and put them to the court to say, please do this. Let us not get into the web of parental alienation. Next question, please.
Okay. This is from Ms. Preeti Gada. Is USA court ordered to return the...
Return the father in the USA will be binding on the mother who is in the custody and reside in India.
Yeah.
Husband execute the order in India. Now the answer is very simple. The answer is in Surya Vadanan and now in Nityanand Raghavan and in Navtej Singh, that if it is in the best interest of the child that the foreign court order should be, so to say, implemented in a habeas corpus petition, the court will do it. But there is no hard and fast rule. We are not going to follow the principle which we followed in 1984 of stamping the order simpliciter. We will go behind the order, we will read into the order. If we find in a summary inquiry that the child needs to go back, we'll send the child back. If we do need to do that in a detailed inquiry, we'll do that. But a foreign court order can be executed not as a foreign court order, but as an order in the best interest of children. Next, please. Hello.
Yes, I'm coming. The
Yeah.
next question. The next question. Next
Indian
question is
couple.
from Rajeshri. Yeah, Indian couple
Indian couple
returned from
returned from
US.
US jobless. Father flew away with children, hiding his whereabouts. What is the remedy for the mother to get access? See, the best remedy is a 226 petition, a habeas corpus. And if, like Ravi Chandran, the mother is jumping station to station every week, a 32 petition of habeas corpus in Supreme Court directly is the answer. The remedy is there. See, you will have to physically find a location where the spouse who has brought the children is available, be it in a state, or be it in a mobile way, moving from place to place, because you have to choose the high court of the territory where the parent is, because the high court will exercise jurisdiction in the territory in which the high court functions as parents portray. But if you can't find, then 32 uses all India. It may not be successful because the Supreme Court may say go to the High Court, but then it's a peculiar situation which may have different circumstances and connotations. Next, please.
Okay, there is next question. If the parties are residing in USA after marriage, mother leaves USA with a child without the consent of the father. The father has been granted custody of by the courts in USA. How can the father execute and enforce the US custody order in India?
The best answer to this is to read Navtej Singh's judgment. The Navtej Singh judgment is a clear answer on how this is to happen. So you bring the US court order to India, file a habeas corpus, seek its implementation, let the High Court take a call in the best interest of children what is to be done, as was done in Navtej Singh's case. This judgment is 6th of March 2018. If you want the citation, I can give it to you. It's available online. Otherwise, anybody can search Dr. Navtej Singh versus State of NCT. There is a complete wholesome jurisprudence in this, and the ultimate order is of the Supreme Court. Again, in Dr. Jasmeet Kaur versus Dr. Navtej Singh, where this order has found favor in a way, and there is a complete answer to this proposition in that perspective. This is a direct answer to this question. Next, please.
Okay, there is one question from Sneha. To what extent it is possible to apply the joint parentage rule in India? As most of the time we find that father is not even ready to pay minimum amount of maintenance order passed by the court. The custody is just out of the question.
See, the answer to this is that you have to ask the court to use punitive measures. Now, if the father is not paying maintenance and he wants access or custody, those rights should be denied to him. So the court has to balance maintenance and custody vis-a-vis each other. Now, if for some reason the family court is not able to convince, feel free to go to the High Court in a habeas corpus to say that I need access to children. I need to have contact with my children. And worst come to worst, the High Court may dismiss your petition and say, go back to the family court. But then you can say, please give me a direction to go back to the family court and please direct the family court to decide the matter in a time-bound frame on how to address this issue. So you may have an immediate redressal. I think one has just to be aggressive of this kind of litigation and maybe go to the High Court if the family court is not giving you relief immediately. You have to take it up seriously. You have to impress upon the point of what you need to do and say that if this is not available, then the father should also not be given any rights in the other perspective.
Okay, there is one more question from Mr. Lal. Request if you can elaborate difference between legal custody, physical custody, share parenting, and what are the responsibility of the custodial parent and non-custodial parent in case of legal custody?
You see,
is it joint or with one parent?
See, legal custody is when you don't have physical custody. Section 6, if the Child is of tender years, custody is with the mother. You have legal custody, but you have no physical custody. So when you have physical control, it is physical custody. When you have no physical control, it is legal custody, because you are a natural guardian of a child vis-a-vis the Hindu Minority and Guardianship Act is concerned. Then what else is there? Legal custody, physical custody, shared parenting. Now, shared parenting, custodial parents' rights, responsibilities. Now, these are very loosely worded phrases. What are the rights and duties of parents vis-a-vis shared parenting is something which you have to come to by agreement. What school will your child go to? What extracurricular activities will your child indulge in? What medical treatment is your child required to have? Now, these are rights which you have to balance by virtue of settlement. I think councils need to get involved, and the best thing to do is to draw up shared parenting plans. Put things in black and white. There cannot be an omnibus parenting plan. Everybody has to find his own parenting plan, and one has to draw up things. See, this is like settlements in divorce by mutual consent when you go in 13B, when you decide everything. So why not have settlement plans for children? You even have parents drawing up prenuptial agreements. So I think it is time when we started, as lawyers, we also started developing parenting plans. We make one, and when we make the next one, we are better off. And then it becomes a habit. So this is something which will have to become viral by use. So that is how it will go. Next question.
It's from Pallavi. Father is of African nationality, has left to Africa, and is not ready to give the custody of one child now. How mother in India can get the custody?
So she has to pursue a remedy in Africa. See, now let us understand comity of courts. We cannot start dictating the courts in Africa on how to go about it. But if you have a litigation pending in India between the same parties, you can use an anti-injunction to restrain the other party from moving the court in Africa. But if there is no litigation in India, you have to pursue your remedy in Africa as per African law. There is nothing you can do. See, if the child is and the father are of Indian origin, you can pursue remedies under Indian law by filing a petition under the Guardian and Wards Act or under the Hindu Marriage Act. In a divorce petition, you can take custody of children under Section 26. But it's very difficult to generalize. One will have to look at facts. Because Section 9, Guardian and Wards Act, will be a big hurdle in your way. If the child is not ordinarily residing in India, the Indian courts have no jurisdiction. So it will depend whether the child was living in India and removed to Africa, or is the child already in Africa? And in that perspective, the litigation will move.
Okay, there is one question from Grishma. In habeas corpus, the High Court state is not maintainable as far as the custody could taken forcibly. Please guide for it.
Come again. Can you repeat the question, please?
Habeas corpus, High Court states
as far as custody of child taken forcibly. High Court states it is not maintainable as far as custody of child is taken. I don't know what this question means. You see, if a child is forcibly taken away without the consent of one parent, habeas corpus is made out. Now let us understand, habeas corpus in the truest sense means removing a child from illegal custody or unlawful detention. Now go back to Gohar Begum, 1960 Supreme Court. Neel Ratan Kundu, 2011. Supreme Court says that when you invoke the remedy of the habeas corpus in 226 or in 32, you don't look at illegal custody or illegal detention. You look at the welfare of the child. So we follow English law. Neel Ratan Kundu is a very good judgment of this 2011 Supreme Court, that when you look at habeas corpus in child custody matters, you don't look at illegal detention. You take it away. You look at parents' betrayal. You look at best interest and welfare. So this is a complete answer to your question, that don't be misguided by the illegal detention. You're not looking at a brick kiln worker or a person in lockup without a warrant. you're looking at the best interest of the child, and that's where the High Court comes in. So you just have to read Gohar Begum and Neel Ratan Kundu to expound your views. Next question, please.
Okay, there is one question. A father is paying maintenance regularly, have order of child access, but wife is not giving child access. What is the remedy for child? Child is age of 16 years. Until what age a husband has to pay maintenance?
See, he has to pay maintenance as long as he's 18. He can voluntarily pay even after that, but he can go back to the court and say, she's not giving me access. I should get access if I need maintenance. And the court will even it out and balance it out. It's a fair game. If he's maintaining and he's voluntarily happy to pay for the child, he must have access and contact with the child. And if there is a serious issue, he can seek the assistance of the court in having a family counselor or an expert report to see if the child suffers from alienation, parental alienation. And then therefore the court can find a way, like it happened in Vivek Singh versus Romani Singh, where Justice Sikri in the Supreme Court felt that the 16-year-old girl who did not wish to see the father, there is something wrong. So they got an expert report, and the expert said there is alienation. So the court said the child needs to spend time with the father, only then we will decide. He needs to come to a level playing field. So I guess you have to take it up with the court and pursue it to see how best you can iron out your remedy. Next question, please.
Okay, this would be the last question. Supposedly in Supreme Court case of Tejaswani Gaud, just mentioned by you, guardian father, after getting the custody of the child, after Supreme Court decision, willingly gives the access of child to Miss Tejaswani Gaud. Will it be violation of Supreme Court order, even if it is for the welfare of the child?
You see, let us be very clear. There is no violation of any court order if a particular proposition of relief or accommodation is made for the welfare of the child. Law will look the other way. A court order will pale and fade into insignificance if something is done for the welfare of the child. If there have been cases where parties have come back together, and there have been very extreme rare cases where parties have even remarried for the best interests of the children. So for children, there is no law. Follow what Wordsworth says. Child is the father of man, and there can be nothing better than dissolving the bitterness in the best interests of children. No judge will hold you for contempt if you do something for the welfare of your child. After all, judges are also parents, and they are also human beings. Next, please. I'm still open, don't worry. Any more?
So right now it was the last question, I guess.
Okay, fair enough. If anybody still has anything, I'm still open. Feel free. No, I can't say court time is over.
I don't think so. Anyone is typing also.
Anyway,
Just give me a moment.
you
sir?
have done let me compliment you on doing an excellent job. I have done quite a few webinars. It's a mass of confusion, but yours is very organized, and I'm very happy that I've been able to give to you in 1 hour 35 years of my professional experience.
Okay, so there is one question who has, pinged me in my WhatsApp, so I'll just read that.
Sure.
The mother is in UAE and children are in India, but due to influence of father, children refusing to talk to mother even on any virtual medium. Even after the prayer for seeking virtual access for child is asked, even the father verbally giving no objection, but mother not getting access, what can be done?
See, you have to pursue your remedy in a UAE court. I've seen matters there. The courts there are different. It's a difficult ride. But through lawyers and judges in the UAE, things can work. I did my last discussion on the book, The Removed Child in the Law in India, in a meeting of the IFL in Dubai. There are good family law practitioners. And let us understand that there is that 60% of the population in the UAE is expatriates. So Muslim law doesn't apply to them, and you need not have the applicability of Muslim laws on custody. You can have your personal law applied through the courts there. It's a difficult ride, but you will have to go to the UAE to enforce your right. And if you have an Indian court order and it is not being pursued in the north, the Passport Act is invoked. If there is a criminal case, the passport is revoked. So there are ways and means of hitting out if there is a severe violation. So I guess one has to just pursue a remedy in a very legal way. You have to follow the legal course. In the last matter, I assisted Mr. Mukul Rohatgi in the Supreme Court. There was a father who had removed a child to the UAE, and there was a kidnapping charge. So a team, thanks to the courtesy of the Supreme Court, a CBI team went and brought the child and the father back. The child is with the mother, and the Supreme Court has seized the matter. So things can be resolved if there is a remedy pursued in the legal perspective.
Okay, there is one last question, I guess. Please explain anti-suit injunction.
Wonderful, excellent. This is something I was wanting to put across. Now, friends, anti-suit injunctions are something which is a new concept in the family law jurisprudence. Anti-suit injunctions are actually a commercial law proposition arising from Modi Entertainment. Now, this is anti-suit injunctions are used in commercial law litigations where stakes are very high and there are parties litigating on the same cause of action in different jurisdictions. So the principle in anti-suit injunction is that if there are two parties litigating, let us say, in an Indian court, and one of them chooses to also invoke the jurisdiction of another court after having acquiesced to the jurisdiction of the Indian court, then the party appearing before the Indian court can be asked or can be injuncted not to proceed in the foreign jurisdiction. And the principle used is forum convenience. The principle of law laid down in Modi Entertainment is that if it is convenient for the parties to settle their dispute effectively and amicably in one jurisdiction, where both parties have access to the jurisdiction of the court, then a parallel forum shopping or parallel adjudication in a foreign court ought not to go on. An Indian court cannot injunct a foreign court, but an Indian court can injunct a party appearing before it not to proceed in a foreign court. So if you have a custody dispute going on between two parents or a matrimonial cause going on between two parents, it's midway and you find a foreign parent in a foreign jurisdiction starting a parallel jurisdiction, parallel matrimonial litigation or a parallel custody petition in the foreign court, then you can move an anti-injunction suit. It's a separate suit and it goes to the family court. It doesn't go to the high court. Let us be very clear. I obtained an order from the Delhi High Court in the case of Navtej Singh to say that this is not a jurisdiction, even like Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, original jurisdiction is there with the High Court. These suits don't go to the High Court, they go to the family court. So you will have to file an anti-injunction suit in the family court seeking to restrain the other party from moving in the foreign jurisdiction, from proceeding in the foreign jurisdiction, but that is subject to the condition that the list is already pending before the family court or the guardian judge in India. Only then the other party will be restrained not to proceed simultaneously in the other jurisdiction because the Indian court is already seized of the matter. That is how it works. Yes, please.
Okay, so there is one question someone is typing. I'll just wait for 1 minute.
No, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Don't stop people. I don't want this to. I don't want to tell anybody that I can't hear anything.
Okay, there is one question from Ekta Jain. In DV case, from the birth, the female child 3 years old is with mother. Can father will ask for custody of the child in DV matter?
DV matter. You see, now DV is another issue. I've done an opinion in Australia where a mother wanting to avoid a custody dispute being settled in the family court invoked the DV Act and she got a custody order. You see, it's very easy to get an order under the DV Act. You can get an ex parte order from a magistrate without any evidence and it's a summary proceeding. But the question is the DV Act order of custody final? Can a DV Act order be supposedly used to stall a decision process of custody in a guardian court or a family court? The answer is no. The DV Act is only a supplementary, is only a stopgap, is only a breather arrangement temporarily. It cannot oust the jurisdiction of the family court. You see, the family courts, you have to read the Family Courts Act on the jurisdiction of the family court. The DV Act will not oust the jurisdiction of the Family Courts Act to decide a custody dispute on issues relating to access, custody, and guardianship. So the DV Act is not an answer in response to a wholesome remedy of permanent nature. You have to come to the Family Courts Act or before the guardian judge under the Guardian and Courts Act.
Okay, this would be the last question, sir. Child is with husband in Mumbai. Wife stay at mother's house in Hyderabad.
Okay.
Earlier, wife doesn't want child custody, but now to harass husband, she has filed DV and custody 498 in Hyderabad against husband and his family. What is the remedy for husband?
Is there any matter pending in Bombay? Is there any matter pending in the court?
In Bombay it is not pending. In Bombay, nothing is pending.
So he should file a petition under the Guardian and Wards Act in Bombay for the sole custody of the child and get an ex parte order of custody under Section 12 till the matter is pending, and he can say that I am being harassed and intimidated by virtue of the misuse of the provisions of the IPC and the DV Act. But this is not in the welfare of the child to be treated like this. So once he's able to get sole custody rights or exclusive custody rights vis-a-vis the welfare of the children in the guardianship petition in Bombay, he may be able to, so to say, balance the litigations coming against him. And once he's able to do that, he can move the court to say that these provisions have been wrongly invoked. And if he's not successful, then he can move the High Court in Hyderabad for quashing the proceedings under the DV Act, saying there are misuse of the provisions of law. They're only being meant to harass me and they're not in the best interest of children. So I guess he needs to have clear remedies and he needs to follow a process by which he can enforce his rights.
Okay, sir, I don't think so. There are any more further questions. So I think we are done for the day. I'll just request Advocate Vaishali Tikle to give a vote of thanks on our behalf.
Okay, wonderful, excellent. And I need a video of what we have all done so that I can
see sir, I'll be sharing. I'll be sharing.
But it's very good that you are live on YouTube, so a lot of people would have got to see it.
So actually, this was the first time we tried.
Oh, great. So how many, you have any idea how many viewers?
Sir, actually, I'm not checking that. I'll just I'll ping you in the personal chat.
No problem. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you very much.
Yeah, Vaishali Tikle, please.
Yeah. Thank you, Shraddha. Sir, the vast and sensitive topic such as child custody and all was beautifully covered in such a short span. I was not, I was not expecting this to happen. And I'm sure all the viewers and listeners they are satisfied with their queries and the answers you have given to them. And also, on behalf of my colleagues Shraddha Dardi and Suvarna Naik, I extend my heartfelt appreciation to you, sir. As during this testing and pressing times, you have agreed to share your wisdom and experience with us all. We are really honored, sir.
Thank you very much. And if we need to do another one on maintenance, surrogacy, marriages, divorces, adoptions, feel free.